Welcome to Smart Cities Week 2015. I'm Carol Stimmel in the Smart Cities Week studio talking to Alison Taylor, who is a vice president at Siemens working on sustainability and cities issue. And thanks so much for joining us today to have this conversation with us. Siemens is known for being an infrastructure company. And one of the things that I've been very interested in as Siemens has been talking more and more about smart cities initiatives is this idea of balancing short-term benefits and strategic benefits. I mean, I guess that's about return on investment, but I think there are other elements too. What does Siemens mean when they talk about this?
Well, I think in the city environment in particular, it's very important to keep that dynamic in mind. You can't really ignore the short-term benefits, the short-term wins, for instance, in a city, because the city leader, an elected official, has a shorter term, oftentimes, than a long-term goal, which could be also very important, like reducing carbon dioxide emissions over time. And we see a lot of cities with really aggressive long-term goals, carbon neutral, for instance, by 2050, or 80% reductions by 2030. And as a company and a sustainability officer that struggles with those goals as well, I understand that there have to be long-term strategies to put those kinds of goals into place. But if you're an elected official, or even if you're a person who's trying to keep your business engaged in sustainability, you have to have some short-term wins as well. You have to keep people engaged, but you also have to keep your company moving forward, or as in terms of a city, you have to show your constituency that you can do things and that you can make a difference. So your constituency may like the fact that you have a long-term goal, but they're going to see what you're doing now. And they're especially going to think about that when election time comes around. So we see that as a very important two kinds of time frames that really have to be balanced and equally important.
Well, that's interesting. That's not just a strategic process issue. What I hear you describing is almost like you have two different kinds of customers. If you're working in a political environment, which you are, not only are you working with the stakeholders, but also their constituency. So do you find it part of your process and part of becoming closer and closer to cities to help people understand language and concepts and things like that? Or are we beyond that in smart cities? Where would you say we are?
No, I don't think we're really beyond that. Okay. I think that we have several strategies that seem to be working. One is when you're talking to a city, particularly about its long-term goals. So let's say we're engaged in how might we help you to reduce your carbon dioxide emissions. We encourage a city to look at that across its silos, its various agencies that may not really talk that much together. The transportation department may do long-term planning, the energy department may do other long-term planning, but they really need to be engaged together. But that's one thing we encourage a city to do. What we do is not only work with a city decision maker, but also influencers, universities, hospitals, other businesses, the entities in a city that are going to stay there beyond that political term, because we need to sustain sustainability, and long-term goals are not going to be met in 4 or 6 years. So that's a strategy that we use, and we encourage cities to look outside of their silos, not only across agencies, but also into the community and work with universities. We're thrilled to see those kinds of efforts really taking shape, cities and universities really starting to work very closely together. It's great for students, obviously. It's also great for the city. A lot of the students may decide to stay in the city. But then there's great thought and research that's coming out that's very focused on the city. And if that political leader moves on, that university is still there and still capable of building on that research. We found that's been a very helpful partnership that sometimes we get involved in too. So UI Labs in Chicago is an example of one of those.
Okay, so I'm hearing you talking about integration, really, but from a different perspective. Commonly when we talk about smart cities, we almost always want to talk about technologies and sensors and data. And that's really important. In fact, in smart cities, a lot of the need to integrate data has caused a lot of interesting things to happen to fuse different departments and cities together too. But you are talking about the integration of healthcare and transportation and different populations, student populations. Is that right? Is that part of the process that you're working to integrate?
So as the city becomes more oriented to a holistic way of governing, then I think they also start to think think about the integration of technologies and what that can do for them. So, for instance, there are intelligent technologies out there now that can help the way in which your transit system works. It's more efficient. If it's automated, there are more cars online, so the capacity increases. That's technology that New York is using now. Paris even has driverless trains, so it's there. There's smart grid technologies.
Right.
So we're seeing some utilities take advantage of some types of technologies so that they can gauge demand response. Buildings are smart, so they're beginning to guide themselves in terms of temperature and lighting, and they can also store energy and put that back on the grid. But these are still kind of silos, even though they're intelligent, cutting-edge technologies. So what the next generation of intelligent technology will do, the smarter city will deploy, is the integration of all of those systems. Mm-hmm. So in a command center, for instance, in the city, an operator can see where the energy is going, where different sources where they could get it from. A building could be storing the electricity, could go back on the grid, and that operator can see where that electricity is available and where to send it. If there's an emergency, then the city operator can respond to that emergency. Maybe send electricity from the shopping mall to the train system where the trains are going to have to be moving faster and getting people out of the city. So there's all kinds of reasons why that more seamless integration could be important. We see that cities are still thinking a little more along the lines of those individual technologies and not quite thinking about that seamless integration just yet.
You made an interesting comment just now. You were talking about how for a lot of these technologies, I think you mentioned driverless trains. I mean, we're there in many ways, but we do have this process problem. Potentially, it's a goals mismatch for different departments or governance issues. And do you have some examples of how you've worked in some of these environments and some of the successes you've seen and some of the more interesting challenges that you've overcome?
Well, so far, the way in which we've seen a kind of seamless, integrated city work has been more in a demonstration context. And I think that's part of what we need to do, is show what's possible. So we do have a demonstration project outside of Vienna, Austria, in which we are actually putting together these smart technologies, some of which are deployed in many cities, as you said. But the real demonstration there is how they can seamlessly communicate with one another and with a city operator, so that the building can put energy back on the grid, the city operator sees that, utilizes that, the transportation system has all interconnected modes, and the consumer can see on their smartphone what their choices are. So those kinds of technologies integrated can be demonstrated. So that's one success we've seen, is showing the possible. We've also seen that when we're involved in a public-private partnership, so I mentioned UI Labs, for instance, in Chicago. That's a study project, really, a collaboration, where we're going to be focused on energy management, physical infrastructure, transportation, and we're going to be utilizing the expertise of universities, civic leaders, city leaders as well, and of course our technology expertise and other technology experts. And we're going to be tackling problems. So it's more of a solution-oriented discussion as opposed to a product-by-product oriented discussion, because we're really talking about integrating those products. So I think you have to have that kind of structure or organization for a discussion to begin with. And we're seeing that as a successful model.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because we've discussed how what's important to you and what you bring to the table is the ability to provide short-term wins, but also long-term benefits. So clearly you're investing in research. It's that same kind of model, right? So investing in that research and tapping into the enthusiasm. And we know, in the utility industry and lots of city functions, we're seeing a lot of retirement and that sort of thing. So that seems like quite a brilliant strategy. What is your vision or belief in terms of the kind of time frame we're looking at, or how we might be moving ahead? Do you feel like in the next 5 to 10 years we'll have transportation systems down, or do you sort of see the whole thing kind of growing up together and fairly rapidly?
I guess I see it growing up together fairly rapidly. No city is the same, so
right.
no
That's
two
a really
cities are
good
the same.
point.
So
yeah.
I think that where transportation may be a really important point in a certain city, it may be a little less important somewhere else, or public transportation may be well utilized one place and not so well utilized in another. And of course, city resources are really important as well. Nobody can rely on the federal government resources right now.
Right.
So oftentimes cities are looking for partnerships, and that may be more available to one city than the other. So it's not going to be the same everywhere. I think mid-sized cities are going to be a very interesting group to watch, because the resources that are available to a large metropolitan area, be they the resources of universities or just financial resources, are not available as much oftentimes in a mid-sized city. A larger city is oftentimes dealing with aging infrastructure. How do we replace that or upgrade it? A mid-sized city may not have that infrastructure yet, so there's real opportunity there. But ideally, we would like to see the various modes inside the city, so the energy, the water, the transportation, growing together, because ultimately integrating those systems. Cities are systems of systems, as I heard Undersecretary Orr say yesterday. Growing those systems and integrating those systems together would be the ideal.
You're leaving us with two really important points, I think. One is what we easily forget, is that there's no cookie cutter city. Every city is unique and has different populations, different geographies, different resources available to it, et cetera. Lots and lots of things to think about there. And also, no matter what that looks like, it's important to integrate. I wanted to thank Alison Taylor for joining us today. She's with Siemens, and I really appreciate you stopping by and raising some of these issues with us.
It was great, good fun. Thank you.